The global economy has proven relatively resilient to material widespread financial losses from cyber attacks to date. However, analysis of near-miss events suggests that far larger losses are quite possible, according to new research from CyberCube. I'm Yvette Essen, Head of Content and Communications for CyberCube, and I'm talking to Jon Laux. He's Vice President of Analytics for CyberCube. Jon, can you tell me a little bit how we conducted this research into near-miss events?
Sure, Yvette. So our team has a library of events that we've built over the years, and we also conduct ongoing research on cyber events as they occur. And I'm using the term event here quite broadly. We look at everything from attacks that might only affect a single organization to things that might affect have significant accumulation potential. And we do analysis on those, both for what did happen as well as what could happen. So the findings in the report represent about 100 events that took place over the last 6 years, and actually about 150 in total if you look further back, that we evaluated as ones that could have some significant accumulation potential to the industry. And then we did analysis of those events to look for patterns, as well as the repercussions for the insurance industry from how those played out.
And can you highlight some of those key takeaways then from your research that we've published in the report?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the first thing to say would be if it feels like, so 100 events over the last 6 years is about 1 every 3 weeks. So if it feels like when you're watching the cyber area, there's a lot going on, that's because there is. But not everything plays out with equal impact to the insurance industry. In fact, of those 100 events, only about 10% of them have actually resulted in any kind of material impact to the insurance industry. And when I say material, I mean like single loss ratio point type accumulation for the industry. So in that sense, it's been a good news story in the sense that very few things have resulted in insurance loss, even though from a cybersecurity community perspective, there's a lot that's happened. But we also have to look at the other side of that, right? So of the things that have happened, things could have been a lot worse, as you said. And so we need to consider not only the events, the way they played out, but how they might have played out a little bit differently, what we might call the counterfactual analysis. But for certain things, it could have been worse. So we talk about NotPetya a lot, but WannaCry is an example. If the code had not had a kill switch in it that was discovered fairly early, that event could have kept going on. With SolarWinds, if the attack had been motivated by destructive purposes rather than espionage, that would have been a very different financial impact for the industry. And so when we think about how those events could have played out, there's significant implications for the industry that models like Portfolio Manager need to be addressing.
Now, you mentioned Portfolio Manager there. Can you tell me a little bit about Portfolio Manager and how we've used that analysis of Portfolio Manager in this report?
Yeah, so I think, essentially what the report says, it's a good news story to a degree, but with an important cautionary note, right? And the primary purpose of Portfolio Manager is to help reinsurance clients understand the potential accumulations of cyber insurance risk. And so what the report has helped us to do is better identify both what the tail risk really looks like, but also to understand what the shape of the curve should look like, in the sense that those near misses that haven't materialized, they're somewhere on the curve, but the curve doesn't necessarily rise maybe as steeply as we earlier thought. This is the 5th version of Portfolio Manager, and as an industry, we've learned a lot since the first version came out. And so we want to incorporate those findings into what the model tells our clients about risk.
And the findings from the report, how have they been reflected into Portfolio Manager version 5?
Yeah, so if you want to get into what our curve tells you about risk, essentially what we've tried to convey with the model, the factual analysis, if you will, is that the lower return periods, the things that we might actually compare against recent experience that we've seen, has been a pretty good news story. And so if you look at our curve at those lower return periods, the numbers have come down, and that's been very conscientious on our part to do that. we looked at frequency as well. We actually felt like the frequency in our model was pretty well calibrated before. So that's a similar story, but the impact of those losses is lower than it used to be. But when you get further out into the tail, we actually wanted to make sure that the tail was thick enough to reflect the risk that we thought was there. And the most significant impact I would underscore that we made in that part had to do with widespread ransomware and wiper malware type of events. We've continued to see those in recent years. Again, maybe not at the financial scale that we're concerned about, but events like Microsoft Exchange, Kaseya, SolarWinds, which, like those kinds of scenarios, I think suggest that the tail risk there could be pretty significant. And so that was a place that we conscientiously sought to reflect a greater potential accumulation than we had in the past.
That's interesting how that report has been reflected within PMV5. The report also does touch on policy wordings. That's quite an important element of the report. Can you tell me a little bit about our findings there?
Yeah, this is a really interesting area of innovation for the industry right now. Different carriers are experimenting with different ways. And I guess the question everybody's trying to answer is, in what way can policy language contain or constrain the amount of catastrophic risk in the policy, either with exclusions or with sublimits? And the market's kind of playing out that question right now. And it's not our job as an analytics company to decide which approach the market should embrace, but we should provide tools that can help the industry think through that problem analytically and sensitivity test what different approaches might result in for a book of business. And so we've done some testing on some of the different wording approaches that are out there, and the impact on the potential capital an organization might need to provide varies significantly depending on the approach that you take. So a more modest approach in some of the charts that we put together might reduce your capital need by, somewhere in the high single digits, maybe. A more aggressive approach to containing the risk might cut your capital by, I think we said, up to 65% or so. I mean, 40 to 60% was not uncommon for some of those more aggressive approaches. And so, these are still things that are being played out, but I think what we wanted to convey to the industry is that there really are some pretty significant consequences, good or bad, depending on the decisions that we make and the approaches that come to carry the day in terms of how the industry manages this risk through wordings.
Great, thank you very much for explaining the findings of the report and how they're impacting our thoughts on PMV5. A copy of that report can be found on our website, as well as more information about Portfolio Manager. Our website is www.cybercube.com. For CyberCube, I'm Yvette Essen.